As always, I'm very happy to be sharing in this process with you, and I appreciate that you come and work at this. I wanted to say a little bit about surrender in this inner work. It means to let go completely or more and more. So an interesting fact is that my teacher, Rudi, Swami Rudananda, his last words were a deeper sense of surrender. He was dictating on a new book that he was writing as the airplane that he was in was going down, and he was, as it turned out, the only person who was killed. He passed on, and it's very sweet to know that those were his last words, because that was his life, deeper surrender, deeper surrender. And curiously, when I think I mentioned this here before, when I learned of this, he was on the way upstate New York, and we heard about it. I heard about it very early, one of the first to hear about it. And I arrived at his store in New York coming from work, and waited there for a while with his mother and a few other people. And the interesting thing, which I've mentioned here before, is that I really didn't feel any sorrow. I felt pain because he was a real human being with flesh and blood. But what I was really grateful for in the middle of that pain was that I had made this deep enough connection with him to have his blessings. Not that I have any opinions about whether he was perfect in every outer sense of the word or anything like that. That had nothing to do with it. But he became, for me, a link to a deeper surrender. And every time I have some pain or other myself, which is, of course, as most of us, most of the time, there is some, but some periods are more painful than others, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or whatever. Things do get intensified. And lately I have had quite a bit of pain physically, and I think it was probably triggered by the fact that I tried to push myself thinking that I was still 30 and I'm almost 80. And, I haven't really quite totally embraced the fact. So I was pushing myself pretty hard. And when I came back to Mallorca from Norway after a whirlwind trip up there, somebody stole my mobile phone on the plane. And that was, for me, very traumatic. I had all my information on it. So it created a lot of tension, which gradually disappeared, but it had some definite impact on my whole system, and so things are triggered which are painful. I know I had, after X number of days, I started to have some recollection of when I was maybe 3-4 years old. I barely remembered it, but I can remember I was lying in my child crib, which was one of these extension beds. And I had what's called in Norwegian vannkopper. I think it's in English, chicken pox, common childhood disease. And I just remembered the feeling of fear that, because it was projected onto me, by my mother. She was very worried. The doctor who came, in those days, doctors came and made a visit to you. And that feeling of, which was really a kind of a fear of death and being abandoned, came out in me very strongly. And then I realized, well, gee, that's exactly the same feeling I had 2-3 years later when I tried to run across the street in the snow, and I fell on the ice in Oslo, and the bus was literally 1 centimeter away from rolling over my head. I think it was really about as close to well, I've had other near-death experiences, but that was very, 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 very fear-producing. And then when I was carried upstairs to my parents' apartment and going to sleep at night, then I started having these tremendous visions of monsters coming out of the wall. And also reflecting back on that, there was a lot of fear in that. So, there's a fear of death that is, in my case, it was imprinted there very strongly. So this was to me very painful in a way to reflect back on that. But I took it as well, what a gift. I can now go back and I can clean up something that is stuck in me, that is traumatic, and that was extremely painful. And when I reflect back on it, I experience basically the same pain that this 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old boy was experiencing. So in that sense, for me, pain is even stronger now than ever, a wake-up call. It's something we can really be grateful for, because when we really can embrace that pain, then it becomes, as Rudi said, as all of you know, most of you know, at least I've heard it, he said, pain is God's love. And in the sense that it is a wake-up call, it is definitely a loving gesture of grace from our deeper inner self, connected with this universal reality that we all are. It's how we look at it that makes all the difference. If we look at it, I think in that first book I wrote, I said something about, if we look at life as a punishment, then we are victims for the whole life. If we look at it as if we are a specially selected group of beings who have the unique favor of God, well, then we are going to have, if we take that too far, then we're going to think, well, I am special and all these other people are not special, so we have to have a war. We have to have conflict. So the only real way to look at life, whether you are any age old enough to be able to reflect on it, is to relate to it as a gift. Life is really a gift and something to be grateful for, just to be able to breathe, just to be in the here and now. Okay, so it hurts. So what? This is, I like Kahlil Gibran, who was very popular when I was a young man, just starting even with Rudi. Then he was popular, Kahlil Gibran. He was a poet and really a great writer. And he wrote this book called The Prophet, which was a collection of poems. And he said about pain, he said, the pain is just a breaking, what is needed to break the shell that is enclosing our limited understanding. He used more poetic words than that, but basically that's what he said. So if we think of, pain, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, as something that is breaking the shell of our limitation, but then we have to be grateful for it, because what we are going to discover underneath it is that pure potential, that pure divine energy that we are, and the fact that we are all essentially one. That's the reality, if we allow ourselves to see it, to go through the process, seeing it. And there are many layers, of this shell. So just because we go through one layer of shell, there will be more. And, I'm 80, but I still expect to go through some layers of shell removal. I'm not 80 yet, almost. So Gibran also says, if we can maintain our heart in wonder, meaning the way we talk, if we can keep our heart open during pain, then, we are able to really appreciate that both pain and joy are two sides of the same thing, two sides of what is necessary in this life to be a genuinely humble, open, grateful human being, connected with all other parts of humanity and living beings. And that's just not a mental idea. That is a real conviction from deep inside us that we have to reach for. And when we do that, we are then using the witness awareness. We are witnessing in a surrendered state, in a non-attached state. It doesn't mean that we don't care. It means that we are deeply compassionate because we feel one with everybody on the most essential level.